Girl sees unconscious millionaire and baby about to be devoured by a king cobra. Then she does this. Let me know what you thought of this story by giving it a rating from 0 to 10 in the comments, and tell me what city you're watching from. I'd love to know if you enjoyed my story and get to know you better, so please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The scorching Texas sun beat mercilessly on the dusty streets of the Riverbend district in Dust Devil Creek, where 4-year-old Emily Grace was rummaging through the trash behind a bakery, hoping to find some day-old bread. Her small, torn and dirty clothes contrasted with the fierce determination in her brown eyes, a legacy of resilience she didn't know she possessed. For 2 years, she had wandered the streets of the small town alone, surviving on the charity of others and her own childish cunning. On that sweltering March afternoon, when the heat soared past 100 degrees, Emily followed a strange noise coming from the direction of the vacant lots near the creek. It was a low cry, almost a whimper, mixed with something that sounded like dry leaves being crushed. Curious by nature and always alert for any chance to find something useful or edible, the girl approached cautiously. What she saw left her paralyzed with a mixture of terror and fascination. A middle-aged man, well-dressed even in his rumpled clothes, was passed out on the red Texas soil. His arms protectively enveloped a whimpering newborn baby, wrapped in white cloths already stained with dirt. But what truly made Emily's heart pound was the sinister presence just a few feet away from them. A large, dark snake with patterns she didn't recognize was slowly approaching the vulnerable pair. Sebastian Thorne, 52, owner of the regional Thorne Mining Corp, had collapsed from emotional exhaustion after a traumatic morning. He had found that abandoned baby on his rural property on the outskirts of town, left in a makeshift basket under a century-old pecan tree. The discovery had shaken him to the core, stirring up ghosts from a past he preferred to keep buried. Emily watched the scene for a few precious seconds, her child's brain processing the imminent danger. The snake continued to approach, its scales glistening under the harsh sun, its forked tongue tasting the air for clues about these strange presences in its territory. The survival instinct that had kept her alive on the streets for 2 years screamed at her to run, but something deeper, a natural compassion that not even the harshness of life had managed to erase, made her act. Without hesitating, Emily picked up a stone the size of her small hand and threw it with all the force her frail muscles could muster. The stone hit the snake in the head, causing more of a shock than a real injury, but it was enough to divert its attention from the easy prey to the new threat. The serpent turned quickly, its eyes fixing on the girl who was now exposed and vulnerable in the open field. What happened next seemed to last an eternity. The king cobra, for that is what it was, a species that should not have been present in that region of the United States, lunged towards Emily with terrifying speed. The girl tried to run, but her bare feet slipped on the loose dirt and she fell flat on her face. The snake seized the opportunity and sank its fangs into the child's right arm, injecting its deadly venom. Emily's scream echoed through the vacant lots, a pure sound of pain and terror that jolted Sebastian from his faint. The businessman opened his eyes in confusion, still holding the baby to his chest, and immediately understood the tragedy unfolding before him. A little girl, clearly a street child from her clothes and appearance, was lying on the ground as a snake slithered away quickly in the opposite direction. Sebastian staggered to his feet, the baby still in his arms, and ran to Emily. The girl was conscious but in shock, tears streaming down her dirty face as she clutched her bitten arm. The fang marks were visible and the arm was already beginning to swell dangerously. "My God, what have you done?" Sebastian murmured, kneeling beside the child, asking why she did it. Emily looked at him with her large, brave eyes, even through the pain. "The baby," she managed to whisper. The snake was going to hurt the baby before the weakness from the venom began to take over her small body. Sebastian felt something break inside his chest. This child, alone and vulnerable, had risked her own life to save two people she didn't even know. Without wasting another moment, he scooped Emily into his arms, still holding the baby, and ran towards his car parked on the nearby dirt road. The race to Dust Devil Creek Municipal Hospital was desperate. Sebastian drove with one hand, keeping Emily propped up on the passenger seat while the baby rested on his lap. The girl drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring disconnected words about flying birds and a woman who used to sing to her. During the drive, Sebastian couldn't stop thinking about the cruel irony of the situation. For months, he had been avoiding any contact with children, fleeing from the emotional responsibilities his late wife, Isabella, had always urged him to embrace. And now here he was, racing to save two children that fate had thrown in his path in the most unexpected way possible. Upon arriving at the hospital, Sebastian screamed for medical help right there in the parking lot. An emergency team immediately responded, placing Emily on a gurney while a nurse took care of the baby. The controlled chaos of the emergency room enveloped them all, but Sebastian couldn't pull himself away, as if an invisible force tied him to the fate of that brave little girl. Dr. Evan Foster, a 45-year-old pediatrician on duty, immediately took over Emily's case. With 20 years of experience in pediatric emergencies, he instantly recognized the gravity of the situation. King Cobra envenomation was not common in that region, which made the treatment even more complex and urgent. While the medical team worked to stabilize Emily, Sebastian found himself forced to answer questions he didn't know how to explain. How had a clearly abandoned child appeared on his property? Where did the baby come from? And most importantly, how had a species of venomous snake not native to the region appeared at that exact place and time? The answers to these questions remained a mystery that would haunt Sebastian for the next few days. But one thing was certain: the lives of everyone involved had been irrevocably changed on that scorching afternoon in Dust Devil Creek. The first 24 hours in the hospital were a whirlwind of medical procedures and disturbing revelations. Emily remained in the pediatric ICU, connected to machines that monitored every beat of her small, brave heart. The antivenom for the cobra's bite had been administered just in time, but her body, weakened by prolonged malnutrition, was struggling to recover. Dr. Foster watched the girl's vital signs with growing concern. During his years in medicine, he had treated many children in vulnerable situations, but there was something about Emily's story that intrigued him deeply. How had such a young child survived 2 years alone on the streets? And more importantly, where did that exceptional courage come from, leading her to face a snake to save strangers? Sebastian hadn't left the hospital since arriving the previous afternoon. He had slept uncomfortably in a waiting room chair, refusing to leave until he knew Emily was out of danger. The baby he had found on his property was also under medical care, being examined by social workers who were trying to uncover his origin. "Mr. Thorne," Dr. Foster said, approaching him the next morning with a grave expression, "I need to talk to you about some worrying findings." Sebastian stood up immediately. Exhaustion etched on his unshaven face. "How is she? Is Emily going to be okay?" "The girl is recovering, but we found evidence of severe malnutrition and prolonged neglect. Her condition suggests she has been suffering extreme deprivation for a long time." Dr. Foster paused, choosing his next words carefully. "We also discovered something interesting about the baby you found." The doctor led Sebastian to a private room where the baby slept peacefully in an incubator. "This is a completely healthy newborn, likely less than a week old. What's strange is that he was found on your property, wearing high-quality clothes and wrapped in clean blankets. This suggests premeditated care, not random abandonment." Sebastian watched the baby through the glass, a strange feeling growing in his chest. There was something familiar about the little face, but he couldn't place it. What are you suggesting, Doctor? That someone deliberately left this child on your property knowing he would be found? And considering your position in the community, it's possible that person specifically wanted you to take responsibility. While the two men talked, Emily slowly woke up in the ICU. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the hospital lights that contrasted sharply with the darkness of the streets where she had slept for so long. A kind nurse named Carmen Foster, 55, was by her side, checking her vital signs. "Hello, little warrior," Carmen said with a maternal smile, asking how she was feeling. Emily tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Carmen immediately offered her small sips of water, watching the girl's every reaction with care. In her 30 years of working with hospitalized children, the nurse had developed a special intuition for handling traumatic cases. "Is the baby okay?" was Emily's first question, her voice hoarse but determined. Carmen's heart ached. Even after going through a traumatic experience and fighting the effects of the venom, the girl's first concern was for someone else's safety. "The baby is great, thanks to your courage. You saved his life. And the man who was passed out. He's here at the hospital looking after both of you. He hasn't left for a single minute." Emily processed this information in silence. During her 2 years on the streets, she had learned to be wary of adults, especially those who seemed to have money. But there was something in the way that man held her in the car, in the genuine urgency in his voice, that was different from anything she had experienced before. At that moment, Sebastian and Dr. Foster entered the ICU. Emily watched the man she had saved approach her bed with a worried expression. He seemed even taller and more intimidating under the hospital lights, but his eyes carried a kindness she hadn't expected. "How are you feeling, little one?" Sebastian asked, his voice softer than Emily remembered. "My arm hurts, but I've felt worse," she replied with an honesty that surprised everyone present. "Doctor," Foster exchanged a meaningful look with Sebastian. The girl's response confirmed his suspicions about the suffering she had faced on the streets. "Emily, can you tell me how you came to live alone? Do you have a family?" The question cast a shadow over the girl's face. She looked at the ceiling for a long moment before answering. "My mum went away when I was 2. I don't remember her much, just that she sang a pretty song before I went to sleep. After that, I stayed with a lady who was her cousin, but she went away too. Then I was alone." Carmen discreetly wiped away a tear. The simplicity with which Emily recounted her personal tragedy was more moving than any exaggerated drama. This child had normalized a suffering that no person should ever know, especially not at only 4 years old. Sebastian felt his stomach churn. The mention of the singing mother brought back a vague, almost imperceptible memory. His late wife, Isabella, always said he should pay more attention to the people around him, especially his employees. There had been a secretary at the mining company a few years ago who always hummed while she worked. What was her name again? "Emily," Dr. Foster said gently. "Do you remember your mother's name?" "Joanna," she replied immediately. "Joanna Grace. She worked in a place with lots of papers and said one day we would live in a nice house." Sebastian's blood ran cold. Joanna Grace had been his secretary for 3 years, from 2019 to 2022. A dedicated and discreet woman who had resigned abruptly, citing family problems. He vaguely remembered her mentioning a young daughter, but he had never paid enough attention to connect the details. The realization hit Sebastian like a punch to the gut. Joanna had worked for him while raising Emily alone, and when she left the company, probably desperate after failing to find another job that would provide a decent living, she had somehow lost her life, leaving her daughter completely helpless. "Dr. Foster," Sebastian said in a controlled voice, trying not to show the turmoil raging inside him, "I need to make some calls. I may have important information about this girl's origin." As Sebastian left to conduct his investigation, something extraordinary was happening on the rural property where it had all begun. Alaric Drummond, Sebastian's junior partner at the mining company, was walking nervously through the grounds, looking for something he had lost in the previous day's confusion. Alaric, 48, had always been an ambitious and unscrupulous man. For months, he had been diverting company funds to finance side businesses that Sebastian knew nothing about. The baby found on the property was no coincidence. It was part of an elaborate plan that had now spun completely out of control. The cobra that attacked Emily was no accident of nature either. Alaric maintained an illegal menagerie of exotic animals on a remote property, using them to intimidate people who opposed his dealings. The king cobra had escaped during a poorly planned transport. At the exact moment, he intended to leave the baby on Sebastian's property. The original plan was simple: leave the child where Sebastian would find him, forcing him to take on responsibilities that would distract him from the company's business. Alaric had discovered that the child was the son of a former employee who had held important secrets about irregularities at the mining company before her departure. But now, everything was falling apart. Emily's presence at the scene had created a variable he hadn't foreseen, and worse, if Sebastian started investigating the baby's origin, he could uncover connections that would lead directly to the corruption schemes Alaric had been orchestrating for years. Back at the hospital, Sebastian returned with information that would confirm his worst suspicions and open a path of revelations that none of them were prepared to face. Sebastian's investigations into Joanna's past revealed a devastating truth that left him questioning every decision he had made in recent years. In the mining company's human resources files, he found not only his former secretary's professional history, but also pleas for help she had made that were systematically ignored by his administration. Joanna had requested a salary increase 3 times between 2020 and 2021, citing difficulties in affording her young daughter's medical care. There were also 2 requests for an emergency loan that were denied by Alaric, who managed human resources at the time. Most shockingly, there was a handwritten letter found in her personal files where Joanna begged for understanding, explaining that Emily needed specialized medical treatment she couldn't afford. "How could I have been so blind?" Sebastian muttered to himself, rereading the letter for the 3rd time in his office. Joanna's delicate handwriting contrasted with the palpable desperation in her words. She mentioned working 2 additional jobs to try to support her daughter, and that Emily spent many nights alone while she worked late shifts at a clothing factory. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Emily was recovering physically, but facing a complex emotional battle. Patricia Mendez, the 43-year-old social worker assigned to the case, had arrived to assess the girl's situation. With 15 years of experience dealing with children in social vulnerability, Patricia immediately noticed that Emily was no ordinary child. "Emily, can you tell me how you managed to find food when you were on the streets?" Patricia asked gently, sitting beside the hospital bed. "I collected cans to sell, and sometimes people gave me food when I helped carry their groceries," Emily replied with unsettling naturalness. "I also knew which bakeries threw out bread at the end of the day, and which restaurants left clean leftovers in the trash." Patricia exchanged a worried look with Dr. Foster, who was monitoring the conversation. The fluency with which the girl described her survival routine indicated a prolonged period of abandonment and a forced maturity that no child should possess. "And where did you sleep?" Patricia continued. "There was a spot under the creek bridge where the rain didn't get in much, and sometimes when it was really cold, Ms. Carmen from the corner store let me sleep in her storage room." Carmen Foster, the nurse caring for Emily, felt her heart clench upon hearing the mention of another Carmen. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Emily, this Ms. Carmen from the store, what was she like?" "Short grey hair, always smelled like soap. She was nice to me, but she said she couldn't take care of me because she was already taking care of a lot of kids. Carmen Foster's blood ran cold. The description perfectly matched her older sister, Carmen Silva, who had mysteriously disappeared 2 years ago, leaving only a note saying she needed to resolve urgent family matters. Could her sister be hiding somewhere, caring for abandoned children? At that moment, Sebastian returned to the hospital with a grim expression that immediately alerted Dr. Foster. "Doctor, I need to talk about Joanna Grace. She did indeed work for me, and I've discovered things that have left me deeply ashamed." Dr. Foster led him back to the private room, where Sebastian recounted his findings. "Joanna asked for help multiple times and was ignored. More than that, I discovered that my partner Alaric systematically denied all her requests, even when I had authorized an emergency fund for employees in need." "Are you suggesting there was deliberate mismanagement?" Dr. Foster asked. "I'm starting to suspect Alaric had specific reasons to keep Joanna in distress. And now, with this baby mysteriously appearing on my property." Sebastian paused, organizing his thoughts. "Doctor, I need to tell you something I discovered about the baby." Sebastian revealed that he had found, among the belongings left with the child, a small gold locket engraved with the initials I.T. They were the same initials as his late wife, Isabella Thorne. But that made no sense, as Isabella had died in an accident 3 years earlier, long before this baby was born. Unless, Sebastian murmured, a terrifying possibility beginning to form in his mind. "Doctor, is it possible to determine the baby's exact age?" Dr. Foster frowned. "From the preliminary exams, we estimate he's between 5 and 7 days old." "Why?" Sebastian did some quick math in his head. If the baby was a week old, it meant he was born right around the time Isabella had. No, it was impossible. She had died in the accident. He had identified the body at the hospital himself. But what if it wasn't impossible? What if there were secrets about his own wife that he had never known? The discovery of the locket brought back memories he had tried to suppress. The mysterious doctor's appointments Isabella had in the months before the accident. Her strange and evasive behavior when he asked about her day. While Sebastian wrestled with these disturbing revelations, Alaric Drummond was at his rural property, desperately trying to control a situation that had become uncontrollable. The disappearance of the Cobra had alerted environmental authorities, who were now investigating reports of illegal exotic animals in the region. Worse still, Alaric had discovered that Carmen Silva, the woman he had secretly hired to care for the baby he intended to leave on Sebastian's property, had disappeared with the child. The plan was simple. Leave the baby where Sebastian would find him, creating an emotional drama that would keep him busy while Alaric finalized the illegal sale of forged mining rights. But Carmen had developed a maternal attachment to the baby and, terrified by Alaric's increasingly violent methods, had fled with the child. What Alaric didn't know was that Carmen had temporarily hidden the baby in the same community where she cared for other abandoned children, including Emily. When Emily saved the baby from the snake, she had inadvertently reunited 2 children who were connected by the web of corruption and neglect that Alaric had created. And now, with Sebastian investigating Joanna's past, these connections were about to be exposed. Back at the hospital, Patricia Mendez was finalizing her assessment when she received a call that would change everything. "Ms. Mendez, this is Dolores Aragon, director of the municipal shelter. I need to report the disappearance of an employee and several children under our care." Patricia felt a chill. Dolores Aragon was known for running the shelter in a questionable manner, but she had never reported disappearances before. What kind of disappearance? An employee named Carmen Silva just didn't show up for work 2 years ago, and she took at least 6 children who were in temporary care with her. "We're concerned she may have created some kind of parallel operation The mention of Carmen Silva's name made everyone in the room look at each other. The pieces of a complex puzzle were starting to fit together, but the picture that was emerging was more disturbing than any of them could have imagined. Emily, who had overheard part of the phone conversation, whispered something that made everyone turn to her. Ms. Carmen wasn't alone. There was a man who sometimes showed up there and scared all the children. He had a snake in a box. Emily's revelation about the man with the snake created a tense silence in the hospital room. Sebastian felt the world spin around him as he realized his little savior had witnessed far more than he imagined. Dr. Foster immediately called the authorities, while Patricia began asking the girl more specific questions. "Emily, can you describe this man?" Patricia asked, keeping her tone calm so as not to frighten the child. He was tall, always wore dark glasses, even indoors. And when he talked to Ms. Carmen, she got really scared, Emily replied, her large eyes revealing painful memories. The other kids would hide when he arrived. He once said that the snakes obeyed him. Sebastian stood up abruptly, his mind finally connecting all the pieces of the puzzle. The description perfectly matched Alaric. And now everything made sense. The forged documents, the embezzled funds, Carmen Silva's disappearance, and most importantly, the appearance of the baby on his property. "I need to go to the office now," Sebastian said, addressing Dr. Foster. "If my suspicions are correct, there's much more at stake here than we thought." As Sebastian hurriedly left the hospital, Carmen Foster made a brave decision. "Patricia, I need to tell you something about my sister. Carmen Silva is my older sister, and she disappeared 2 years ago after having problems at the municipal shelter. But before she left, she told me something strange." "What did she say?" Patricia asked, sensing that more important revelations were to come. "She said she had discovered a network of people who used abandoned children to blackmail wealthy businessmen. That someone was forcing her to participate, threatening not just her, but all the children under her care." Dr. Foster interrupted the conversation when his phone rang. It was Sebastian, and his voice carried a desperate urgency. "Doctor, I need you to take Emily and the baby to a safe place immediately. I've discovered something terrible about Alaric, and I'm going to confront him now. Sebastian, that's dangerous. Call the authorities first. There's no time. He's destroying evidence as we speak, and if he realizes we've discovered the truth, he might do something drastic to my sister." "Your sister? What are you talking about?" The call was abruptly cut off, leaving everyone at the hospital worried and confused. But Sebastian had unintentionally revealed a crucial piece of information. He had discovered that Carmen Silva was his sister. At the mining company, Sebastian confronted Alaric in his office, finding him burning documents in a metal trash can. "So you finally figured it out," Alaric said with a bitter smile, not bothering to deny his actions. "Why, Alaric? Why did you do this to Joanna, to the children, to my family?" Alaric laughed with disdain. "Your family? You want to know about your family, Sebastian? Your dear wife Isabella was pregnant when she died. Pregnant and hiding it from you because she found out about your extramarital affairs." The accusation hit Sebastian like a lightning bolt. "That's a lie, is it? Then explain how the baby you found has her locket. Isabella gave birth in secret, planning to leave Dust Devil Creek with the child. Carmen Silva was helping her because they're foster sisters, something you never knew because you never bothered to get to know your employees' families." The revelations continued to pour out like an avalanche. Alaric explained that he had discovered Isabella and Carmen's plan and had been blackmailing them for years. When Isabella died in the accident, the baby was left with Carmen, who hid him, fearing reprisals from Alaric. "Joanna found out about the scheme when she worked here. That's why I cut off all her requests for help. I was forcing her to stay silent, but she threatened to expose everything, so I had to get rid of her another way. "What did you do to Joanna?" Sebastian asked, his voice dangerously low. "Nothing directly. I just made sure she lost every job she got in town. Eventually, she couldn't take the pressure and—" Alaric paused dramatically. Desperate people make desperate decisions. The implication was clear. Alaric had systematically destroyed Joanna's life to the point where she saw no way out. Her death had left Emily completely abandoned, forcing her to survive on the streets while Alaric continued his schemes. And the plan was to leave the baby on my property to blackmail me too. Exactly. A lost child mysteriously appearing would make you feel obligated to care for him, especially if you found out he was your son. While you were distracted playing dad, I would finalize the sale of the forged mining rights to international buyers. Sebastian realized the extent of Alaric's cruelty. He had orchestrated years of suffering, destroyed entire families, all for financial greed. Where is Carmen now? On the run, hiding with other children somewhere in the city. But not for long. When I'm done here, I'll find her. At that moment, the authorities arrived at the office, alerted by Dr. Foster. Alaric was arrested, but not before revealing the approximate location where Carmen was hiding with the children. The search led to an abandoned house on the outskirts of Dust Devil Creek, where Carmen Silva had created a makeshift shelter for 6 abandoned children. When found, she was in a state of nervous exhaustion but had protected the children with her own life. Back at the hospital, Sebastian faced the truth about his life. The baby was indeed his son with Isabella, born from a relationship he had completely neglected. Emily was the daughter of an employee he could have saved if he had paid attention to her suffering. But as he processed these painful revelations, Sebastian made the most important decision of his life. He would officially adopt both Emily and his biological son, Benjamin. He would transform part of his rural property into a proper shelter for children in social vulnerability, hiring Carmen Silva as its coordinator. The most emotional moment came when Emily, still recovering in the hospital, held the baby she had saved for the first time. "He's your little brother now," Sebastian said, tears streaming down his face. "And you will never be alone again." Emily looked at Sebastian with her large, wise eyes. "You're really going to take care of us? You won't leave like the others? I promise I will never leave. You saved me too, Emily. You saved me from being a person who only thought about himself." 6 months later, Sebastian had transformed his rural property into a true sanctuary for abandoned children. Emily, now healthy and attending school, had become the protective older sister Benjamin needed. Carmen Silva ran the shelter with maternal dedication, finally free from the terror Alaric had imposed on her life. Dr. Foster visited the children regularly, providing free medical care. Patricia Mendez had become a constant presence, coordinating adoptions and ensuring that each child received the proper attention. On a sunny September afternoon, Sebastian watched Emily teaching Benjamin to take his first steps on the lawn of what was once his lonely property. The girl who had risked her life to save a stranger had, without knowing it, saved an entire family from selfishness and neglect. "She really is special," Carmen Silva said, approaching Sebastian. "They all are," he replied, watching the other children play in the yard. "We just needed to learn how to see them." At that moment, Emily looked at Sebastian and smiled. A genuine, happy child's smile. Something she had forgotten how to do during her years on the streets, and for the first time since Isabella's accident, Sebastian felt he had found his true purpose in life, to be a father, not just by blood, but by heart, to all those children who needed a second chance. The song Emily now hummed was no longer one of sadness, but of hope, and it echoed throughout the property, reminding everyone that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can change the entire world. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.